county council, and potential board action. The results of closed sessions held at the meeting of March 25th, 2008 include item 19, closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9B1, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case. County council board action was that it was canceled. Item 20, closed session, a conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, property APNs as follows: 44-011-049 and 44-011-52. Agency negotiator Brent Harrington or alternate to be determined. Negotiating party Ryan Voorhees. Under negotiation, instruction to negotiator regarding potential purchase price, financing options, county council administration, board action, nothing to report. Item 20B, addendum closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9B1, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case. County council continued from 3/18/2008. Board action, no action taken. 20C, item 20C, addendum closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9B1, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case. County council board action continued to April 1st, 2008. We now move to our consent agenda. These are items that are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They'll be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion. Any items that the board wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Staff? Members of the public? Do I hear a motion on the consent?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes on 5-0 vote.
Bruce is leaving, so he's official.
Yeah, congratulations, Bruce. Retroactively. Yes, we will now take a recess until 9:10, where we will move to public comments. Okay, we'll move to public comments, and I would ask that people attempt to limit their comments to 5 minutes each. If possible, for your benefit, we have this little time thing which actually goes to 5 minutes and 12 seconds.
Do that one first or not? So either way, I'll come back to it.
I think that's the second one.
Oh, okay.
So, anybody from the public wish to speak? Mary Ann.
Of course. It's
Mary Ann.
As most of you already know, my name is Marian Coran. I'm a volunteer with the Calaveras Youth Mentoring Program, and I'm here today to remind all of you that the Calaveras Youth Mentoring Program's big fundraising show is only 11 days away. In fact, this is the time, if you have not already bought your tickets, to go ahead and buy them. For those of you, and there's a couple of new folks, I think, sitting up here, who might not have heard about the Follies, this is a variety show comprising people in business, your friends, your neighbors, elected government officials sometimes, dressed in costume, lip-syncing to a popular song or show tune with the goal of being as outrageously funny or entertaining as possible. There is nothing else like this in this county. Mr. Lawton, please, sir, you need to come. You're a new kid on the block. You've got to watch this. I know all the board is supportive of this program, the Youth Mentoring Program, and the Follies. Marita Calloway starred in 2005. That took a lot of guts. I have seen Russ Thomas, Bill Claudino, and Steve Walensky attend our first rehearsal meeting. And as all of you know, my goal is to have all 5 board members starring in the Follies in the future. And that includes Tom, you too. In the meantime,
Good
I
luck.
would like everybody out there in the audience to pick up their phone and call Frogtown, because that's where we're going to have our show, 736-2561. Make your reservations today. Benefits from this show support our very own Calaveras Youth Mentoring Program. We even have a website, www.calaverasfollies.com. And for all of those who just haven't seen one of these red stuffers, I will let you all have some. And perhaps that can be facilitated by Madeline. Thank you.
Marion's the drill sergeant for the show, if you guys haven't. She's awesome. It wouldn't happen if it wasn't for her energy.
And I do believe I can say this for the entire board, that the rest of us are grateful for the courageous Supervisor Callaway, who stepped forward and ignored our general view that discretion is sometimes the better part of valor, and did a great performance. So
It almost cost her the election.
It's legendary, and but the rest of us fear to tread so far. But,
They're wussing
but
out, Marion. They're wussing out.
She does set a great
Yeah.
example, and it's a great program. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak under items from the public? In that event, we'll move to the next agenda item, which will be item 11. This is the discussion and possible action regarding our resolution proclaiming the month of April Parkinson's Awareness Month. And I
Good
believe
morning.
Jeannie Boyce says something.
Jeannie Boyce, Director of Calaveras County Health Services Agency. Before you, you have a resolution that we are asking the board to support declaring April Parkinson's Awareness Month. And I'm here today in partnership with several folks from the Proactive Parkinson's Project who would like to speak to you about the impact that Parkinson's has upon families and individuals in Calaveras County, Amador County, as well as nationwide. Rosemary Wilson is going to speak to you first, and then Sarah Johnson.
Thank you. Rosemary?
Good morning, everybody. I think you might well remember this time last year, in fact we were a little bit late off the getting things together. I came before you and spoke about the Proactive Parkinson's Project that we, in fact, at that time had just started up in Calaveras County. I think we'd had a couple of meetings. You might also remember that my talking here got the attention of my PhD colleague who's now in Germany, and since then my PhD supervisor has emailed me, so you never know what can come out of talking before you guys. Thanks to Sarah and several other people within the county, we've achieved quite a bit, and I have a list to read to you, telling you just how far we've come in the last few years and this over this last year in Calaveras County. So our accomplishments include meeting with over 200 people in 3 counties and by telephone and mail with those in other areas of California as well as in other states, making educational presentations to approximately 1,200 community members and medical professionals, providing every library in Amador and Calaveras County with Parkinson's disease literature, making in-home visits, conducting family meetings and facilitating 2 monthly support groups, one up in Pine Grove in Amador that meets on the third Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, the third Thursday, and the other one that's in fact going to take place at 10 o'clock today on the first Tuesday in the Senior Center just across the road. We've been writing and publishing press releases and articles which are printed in thousands of news sources every month, as well as posted on electronic media. We've been maintaining a website with extensive resources for Parkinson's patients and their caregivers, which is the proactiveparkinsons.org. Been maintaining a national presence via support group listings on national and international Parkinson's Foundation websites. And we also offer education and support by telephone 24/7 at 296-2575. So I'd like now to introduce Sarah Johnston, who's the founder of the group, and also hand out some literature for you, if I can reach under here. And I hope that you'll entertain our request to declare April the Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month. Thank you.
Good morning. It's nice to be here again for this purpose, requesting a resolution declaring April's Parkinson's Awareness Month. I'm Sarah, and this is my service dog in training, Chai Tea Tai Chi. I always thought service dogs had to be huge animals, but that's not true. So he's being trained to do all kinds of nifty things for me. This is the beginning of the 4th year of this project, which is grassroots, all volunteer, virtually no support from anyone except ourselves. We're a group of people who were devastated by the diagnosis of Parkinson's and could receive no help or information here in the foothills. So we created it with the hopes that anybody else who's diagnosed won't have to go through the loneliness and isolation we did. With us today are several people. If you'll just stand up, please. From the Parkinson's support community. Thank you. Some of us have PD, and some I do, and some of the people here today are patient advocates. Chai Tea would like to speak now. We're very blessed to have such good support in the community. And Rosemary, did you pass on? Yes. Okay, you got the literature, so please check our website. For every patient, and there's estimated 200 to 250 in this county, there are 4 to 5 other people directly impacted by Parkinson's. That's the partner, the caregiver, usually 1 or 2 family members, and frequently a good friend. So it's not just a tiny little number of people we're looking at that need help and support. At our support groups, the one thing that wasn't on our accomplishment list is, in addition to learning about research, diet, exercise, we have fun. The people here in San Andreas decided to name themselves San Andreas Movers and Shakers. It's not our fault. And they're rascals. They're absolutely rascals. Their attitudes are wonderful. We range in age from 30s to 80s, so Parkinson's isn't any longer an older person's disorder. So please, when you think of supporting community programs, please think about those of us with Parkinson's who are working to meet the previously unmet needs of our community members. And you've got your homework. I'd like to introduce Sue Costa, who's going to read a little poem, and J.R. Hunt, who's going to pass out a very special treat for you. Sue has a message for her
Okay. This is a poem called I'm in a Pickle, written by one of our Parkinson's patients. Sometimes I shake, sometimes I freeze, sometimes I wiggle like I have fleas. My pinky flutters like a bird, even before I say a word. My foot moves slow and drags along. It gives me time to sing a song. They say it started in my brain, a certain cell I need to gain. Dopamine is made of gold. I'd buy it fast if it were sold. My mind is fine, and I'm not fickle. But as you can see, I'm in a pickle. Parkinson's is my disease. Help us fight it, if you please.
So that's our message to you. We are in a pickle, and if we can help educate more people in the county through educational presentations at clubs, groups, organizations, civic associations, please let us know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we take action on this, I would like to thank the folks who have put this together. I know it started as a very lonely effort to pull people together, but I know that many people have taken comfort and felt support now that there is an organization and an advocacy. It's made a difference in this county, and I believe Sarah and Rosemary kind of put their lives into this mission, and that have done just wonders in just 1 year's work. So thank you so much for what you've done. And with that, Jeannie, would you like to say anything more before we take action?
Oh, I think they've pretty much said it all. We really appreciate the work of all the volunteers in our community that help people with Parkinson's and help families. So we're here to support and ask you for your support to declare April Parkinson's Awareness Month.
I don't think I've ever seen a resolution with a better chance of passing unanimously. Who would like to do the honor
I'll be
of
happy
making
to.
this
I'd like
motion?
to move the resolution proclaiming April as Parkinson's Awareness Month.
Do I hear a second?
Second. Oh, let Tom do it.
Let's all of us second that, and we'll all be sponsors of this, if the record could show. And is there any further discussion? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you
Done.
for your support.
Thank you for your proposal. We will now move to actually item 13. Upon request from the administration, we will reverse the order and go 13 followed by 12 in that order. This is a discussion and possible action on a resolution approving the county's juvenile justice development plan and allow the chief probation officer to sign the youthful offender block grant. Yeah.
Good morning.
Mr.
Michael
Prilich.
Prilich, Chief Probation Officer. Well, before you today is going to be two things. One, from us to go to the Correction Standards Authority, which would essentially approve our plan, and then some ways that we would spend the money that we already have sitting in a interest-bearing account. So we've already made some money on it. Haven't spent any of it yet, though. It does. I was tempted to put it on the consent agenda, but thought you might want to discuss it a little bit because it does change some positions in our department. It doesn't create any new ones, just actually increases some of the efficiencies that the staff will be able to do, and it's going to actually increase our ability to treat offenders in a way that needs to be done. And it's also kind of preparing for what's to come, because part of this is, I think, part of the initial plan of changing some of the things of the whole parole structure in the state of California. And I'm sure some of you have seen the LAO's office, or Legislative Analyst's office, that made some remarks about that they think, the probation department should take over certain portions of parole statewide. And it's really not a good idea. But the other thing is that we have this SB 81 that this was taken from, virtually put a lot of the parole functions for which used to be the youth authority into the county departments by giving us a little bit of money. Technically, it should be saved from any legislative attacks because it is it's in statute now that this will happen. We'll get this year we got $58,500 for each year till whenever. We'll get $117,000. We get the minimum amount. So we'll be able to do some services by providing a series of Deputy Probation Officer 1, 2, and 3 in the department, and also actually create the Deputy Probation Officers 3s we have now aren't real supervisors. They kind of are, but they can't do a lot of the things per their job description that we would need to really be good supervision. And that's supervision of staff to make sure staff's accountable. You know, we do a good job about holding offenders accountable, but we don't always hold ourselves accountable. It also is going to provide some money that we can partner with other agencies in the county and just expand some of our existing services. So, and then behind this resolution would be something from the HR department. So I'm sure you have some questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mike.
Marita?
I have just one. It's a 12, but it's an item 12 question, but tied to 13. The position is from a grant. So what happens when the grant goes? The board's been fairly...
They're calling it a grant, but it's a block grant. It's an allocation now that each county is going to get, and it's in legislation now that this will be. It's
so,
part of the.
Mike, excuse me, but it would take additional legislation to cancel this.
To cancel it. So.
Okay.
And to answer your question specifically, if that did happen down the road, then we do have provisions where we would lay off for lack of funds.
Or go to the general fund.
Or make other proposals at the time.
So that's, I mean...
You can cross that bridge at that time.
I mean, it's always nice to read when there's no fiscal impact to the general fund, but when they're grant funded, that's a standard board question. Just wanted an answer. Thank you.
And
Part of the proposal in front of you as well, when Mike and I got together to review his personnel requests as part of the plan, was to also take a look at this fiscal year in the budget and kind of what we're facing. And so what's in front of you is really the probation unit supervisors. Moving the 1, 2, 3s is title only at this time, and then he will make those financial decisions maybe in next fiscal year to support what his budget is at that time. So we're trying to be fiscally frugal as well with the proposal.
Yes, I understand this was long sought, but not funded, and now with the prospects of funding, we're getting ready to implement. Is
Yes.
that the gist of it?
For the last several budgets, Mike has proposed these unit supervisors, and we just have not had the funding to support him. So
I understand
now
he won an
found that.
award of some sort on that one of those presentations.
My question was basically the same as Marita, and you answered that on what happens when the block grant goes away, because the implication is, you say under fiscal impact that the block grant will fund the remainder of this fiscal year and fiscal year 2008 and 2009. To me, the implication is at that point the block grant needs to be reauthorized or something, and maybe it will and maybe it won't. But you're saying as of this point in time, that goes forward.
That's correct. Yeah, it's legislation because the DJJ, the Division of Juvenile Justice, needed to get out of the...
Okay. As I read item 12, and since the two are tied together, it's all right if I discuss item 12.
That would be fine. We can discuss these concurrently at this point.
As I read item 12, how you wish to spend some of this money is basically on a reorganization and classification. It's not for new personnel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so I would just put into the record, you need to be careful then on that funding source, because once you promote somebody, it's not like you cut the last position. You know, now you've got to demote 2 or 3 people because the funding goes away. That's a different issue than cutting the last position.
That's an excellent point.
You know, I'm supportive of both, but I think you need to be very aware of that funding source and sort of, you know, knowing what you're going to do if it goes away, because I don't think you can run out and demote a bunch of people.
That's correct.
That completes my comments.
Other comments from the board on either item 12 or 13?
Can I add one thing?
Of course.
I'd like to propose a different resolution. We had a title change only in the memo for the 1, 2, 3, and actually for the system, for both the auditor's office and our office, we actually went through and changed the 1, 2 and made them 1, 2, 3s. We think it's clear, just in the title only aspect. So I don't know if you'd like to look at it ahead of time. It basically just sets out.
Which is what Mike was requesting.
Exactly.
Right. It sets forth the 1, 2, and 3 in financial detail. Is that what you're saying? Or
What we did is we highlighted that it was a title-only change in the memo, but we decided to go ahead and put it actually in the resolution. When it's title-only, you don't necessarily need to do it, but we
Okay.
felt we would like to make
So
it
are we
more
talking the
formal.
resolution on 12 or on 13?
12.
12, okay.
So you're just saying the
12
resolution
is-
now reflects what the request on the memo is?
Exactly. It's
so
more
12 is
specific.
amended as submitted here and described.
Yes.
And
I
at
don't
this
think you read 12 into the record.
No, I have not read 12 into the record because I was asked to do 13 first. I believe there's an order to this, so we will take action, or I would
Move the
request a motion
resolution
on
from item
13.
13.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And we will now need to read into the record the item 12, resolution authorizing changes to the position control list for the probation department for fiscal year 2007-2008. We have the resolution before us and an amendment to that adds the position.
Mr. Chair, I would move
position
the
control
amended
list.
resolution.
Okay, there's a
Second.
motion. Second. Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Items 12 and 13 are adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move to item 14, a discussion and possible action regarding a minute order adding additional priority programs for the county's federal advocacy program agenda for calendar year 2008 and federal fiscal year 2009. This is the Community Development Agency. Bob Selman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I am here asking you to consider the addition of the two programs that were set forth in your packet on behalf of Calaveras County Water District. They actually are the applicants for these programs. We bring them to you to add into your request as following our requests, not necessarily ahead of our priorities, but certainly one of our priorities, because these programs are of great significance to the ultimate development of both the northern and southern corridors in our county. CCWD is here to present the specifics, and if you would like, I believe there's even a motion already included, so I'll just step aside and let them explain it to you.
Just one question on this, because we have a delegation departing for Washington, D.C. on our priorities tomorrow.
That's why you're here today.
Is the request that we include this in what we're carrying with us?
Yes, excuse me. That's why, that was the immediacy of this, and you'll forgive us for our brevity in preparing this material for you. We recognize this is, in fact, a matter of immediacy. So I will step aside and let Mr. Andrews or whomever make the presentation.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dave Andrus. I'm the General Manager of the Calaveras County Water District. Excuse me. Just want to give you a brief summary. I won't take up your time. I know you have other important items on the agenda, but we previously met with County Administrator Bob Lawton and Planning Director Bob Selman to discuss these issues. We have two projects that are priorities for our legislative delegation. And there's actually a third project as well, which is the Cosgrove Creek Flood Control Project, which is a joint project with the county as a lead agency. But the main focus of today's discussion includes the Calaveras Regional Water Supply Infrastructure and Environmental Restoration Program. Is the first project. That includes what we're calling the Valley Springs Comanche area groundwater study and attempt to bring a pipeline water project for groundwater recharge and agricultural use. It's a raw water line This was a subject of our lobbying efforts to get about a $3 million authorization in the what they call the WARDA bill, the Water Resources Development Act. Of that, we're requesting $600,000 this year to get that program started. This would be working with the Army Corps of Engineers to develop the design, the environmental issues associated with it, and bringing in trying to locate a new infrastructure for intake on the Calaveras River to bring water, raw water again, to the Valley Springs, Comanche area. The other project is called the Calaveras County Regional Water, Wastewater, and Recycled Water Facilities Program, and this involves the Highway 4 corridor. This project includes trying to regionalize facilities in the Highway 4 corridor area, which we're defining primarily from the area of Angels, City of Angels, up to the Vallecito treatment plant that we have, and it does also include Forest Meadows area potentially, but we have some concerns that that might be just a little bit far out of our scope of being able to consolidate facilities in that area. So that's what we're looking at in that respect. Again, that's under a separate bill that Senator Boxer has required about $20 million statewide for California, and that we're asking again for $600,000 to initiate that program to try to look at ability to consolidate both water and wastewater facilities. We're also looking at trying to bring agricultural raw water to some of the vintners primarily and some other types of growers in the Highway 4 corridor area. The ability to receive these funds is critical for those programs to move ahead in order for us to try to get, let's say, consolidation efforts going, jump-started. We feel that both these programs, if funded this year, will open up additional funding in future years. And again, I'd just like to emphasize, we're here to cooperate with the county. These programs do not compete for any funds that you're currently going after. These are funds that are in addition to that allocations that you're looking at your program. And we wish that your board would consider giving us the support. And our delegation is following up in May. We'll be in Washington to discuss these programs as well. And we hope that your delegation could, in meeting with the various legislative people in Washington, could support our programs as well.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have two, Dave. On the consolidating of facilities, I welcome that. I just think inevitably that's going to happen. But you already are the water purveyors in Forest Meadows, so why wouldn't that be part of the Highway 4? What am I missing there?
Well, the only thing is what we're trying to do, our primary problems in that particular area are Vallecito, obviously Murphy Sanitary District's facilities. City of Angels has their own water plant and what have you. Because of the distance involved, it makes the projects much more expensive, because the concept would be we would bring primarily, the water supply would not be affected. That's all treated from our Hunter's treatment plant, which is upstream of Forest Meadows or uphill. But the wastewater, one concept that we've been looking at would be to bring the wastewater down from Forest Meadows into possibly a regional plant in the Murphy's Vallecito area. So that's why it's sort of separate, only because it begins to be very expensive to do that.
I support this, the concern I have, because you're going to be lobbying for this too in May, is that the fiscal impact is none, but we are going to be asking Ferguson to work on this with our support. So now we're adding to the shopping list of items for them to watch. And they're going to do it out of the goodness of their heart.
I'll review the contract with Ferguson and see if it limits it, if their activities are done on an item-per-item basis, or whether it's a flat rate for our entire
it was real clear that they would only have time, and the county was to set its priorities. We limited ourselves to certain priorities so we would have the time
I think...
And they would have the time, that's all.
I think the primary intent of this is to enable the delegation that's going to Washington to be able to speak with our representatives and their staffs with the blessing and approval of the board. I don't know that it's being contemplated as being added to the workload for Ferguson, but absent action by this board, I don't think your delegation to Washington would feel comfortable on its own initiative saying, oh, and Calaveras County also, hopes you'll consider favorably a regional approach to this or that. So I don't know that it's not part of the Ferguson group's initiative.
Okay.
I'll give my 2 cents worth, and I'll just address the Highway 4 corridor. But to me, that's clearly the most important study affecting land use on the Highway 4 corridor, and I think it should be frankly the priority for the Ferguson group, at least as far as the Highway 4 corridor is concerned. And the reason we didn't put it there initially is because CCWD was doing it, and you had your own lobbyist and the like. But I'm happy that you're here, and I think we should work collaboratively on both of these programs. But if we're going to do something with the general plan, and if we're going to redo the Murphy's community plan, et cetera, this study needs to be done, and we need to be incorporating, in my opinion, some regional solutions to the local problems that we're facing there, particularly between Forest Meadows and Angels Camp. So I'm very supportive of this. If you're ready for a motion, I'd be happy to make a motion.
I'd just like to ask a question
I'd like
first.
to hear further, if there's any further discussion, and then we'll make the motion.
Just to be clear, David, if I understand correctly, these projects, the $600,000, so let's just say the one for the western part of the county, is a standalone request, although it has obvious integral involvement with the projects that are going on down there. So I'm assuming, or tell me if I'm assuming correctly, that although it is a standalone request for the $600,000 to do this survey, the hope is that if the federal government feels positive and is interested in assisting us with the problems down there, that this will be an obvious necessary component, and they'll look favorably upon that as well. At least that's the hope. But it's not tied to the current request we have for the Cosgrove Creek program and so on and so forth, but it is actually a standalone request.
Yes, it is. And what we've heard from our legislative delegation is that the projects that will be funded under these programs that we're requesting money under are only the ones that have regional benefit and have regional support. So that's one of the reasons why we're here, being the county, having that regional perspective. But I think our position is, and the money for like the Cosgrove Creek project, that's a separate funding source under the Corps of Engineers, so that is not in jeopardy. That is on the table. It's a continuing funding obligation of the Corps, and they want to move ahead with that particular project. And in fact, they've made a request to sign an agreement with the county to try to move forward with going to the budget process with a contract in hand, so that that money is locked up for the county for Cosgrove Creek. Again, we're an integral part because we own facilities there, the district does, right, and are cooperating under our MOU that your board signed last year. But again, our requests, they're standalone in the sense that we feel that they are regionally have regional benefits to the county, both on the land use side, potential revenue, and just the way things develop, particularly in the Highway 4 corridor, has strong implications with the county, and hopefully will improve the services that are there for the communities.
Good. I agree, and I strongly support this.
Thank you.
Other comments? Because I have a couple. I think this, I'm going with the delegation, and I'm real excited to advocate for this. It's maybe a little overdue. We have so many different tiny pieces that even if we put them all together would barely be able to respond to the need that's being expressed throughout the county. We had an economic development study session, and we talked about this at some length, and as Supervisor Tryon spoke articulately on this, that we can talk about it all we want, but until we deal with our infrastructure, we can't deliver services to things that we actually want to do. Agreeing on it, having the concept, is very different than having the capability. So this is the kind of thing that gives us the basis to at least begin to plan for that. And I think it's timely, it's hopefully going to be effective, and I look forward to the board's sending us to accomplish it. Do I hear a motion?
Tom gave the motion.
Tom made the motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Any briefings between now and 5 a.m. tomorrow would be most appreciated.
Thank you, David.
We'll now move actually to item 15, discussion and possible action regarding adoption of an ordinance amending Calaveras County Code Section 2.36, Department of Public Works, abolishing the office of the County Road Commissioner and assigning those functions to the Director of Transportation and Public Works.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Item 16, discussion and possible action regarding a minute order authorizing board chair to sign a letter opposing the proposed 10% reduction in state general fund contribution to multi-county EMS agencies and requesting increases in the current state funding for that purpose. Mr. Andres.
Yes. Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Steve Andres. I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Valley EMS Agency, which serves as the local EMS agency for Calaveras County, as well as Amador, Alpine, Mariposa, and Stanislaus. I appreciate the time to come before you today with a request for this board's support in looking for and understanding very well the economic times we are in at the state level. However, we are requesting support from this board to request augmentation to our state general fund allocation for multi-county agencies. I do have a brief presentation here to give that really tells a little bit about what we do as an agency and the history of the support from the state, why it was initially established, and what has happened since that time. Before I do that, I would like to introduce some staff that I brought with because we have had some changes. Jim Warrow, who is now he used to be the liaison to Calaveras County, he is now our deputy director. And in his place as liaison to Calaveras County is Richard Murdoch. And with that, there are 7 regional EMS agencies in the state of California, much like Mountain Valley. And all of those regions are, at this point, really in financial crisis, have been for a number of years, and it's been getting worse and worse as time goes on. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to do here. The EMS Act was established in 1981. Before that time, paramedic programs were established in California in 1970, the first one in Los Angeles County, and that was really an experimental program that was done under the current legislation then, which was called the Wentworth-Townsend Act. And that act said that any county who wanted to establish a paramedic program in California could do so, and they had some very general guidelines for that. What happened under the Wentworth-Townsend Act, and that was in effect for about 10 years, is some of the larger counties, urban metropolitan counties, took advantage of that and established paramedic programs. However, because there was no standardization in the act of what those paramedic programs could look like, they were pretty much all over the board. So a paramedic in one county was not necessarily a paramedic in another county. The other problem was that these were programs that were established only in the large metropolitan or urban areas. Thus, in 1981, Senate Bill 125 was passed. It was authored by then Senator Garamendi. And the legislative intent was to provide the state with a statewide system for emergency medical services, so that when somebody travels through the state of California, the level of service that they receive in the event of a car accident or whatever injuries or illness, that there would be some standard of care throughout the state of California. It also required that each county to have a local EMS agency, or a LEMSA, to develop, implement, and monitor those EMS systems with any counties that had a program. To ensure that EMS was provided throughout the state and not just in the urban pockets, the EMS Act provides for special funding to multi-county EMS agencies, or LEMSAs, which serve rural areas with extensive tourism, to reduce the burden of providing the increased services due to that tourism. And again, there was multiple small counties throughout the state that really could not afford to put on this program, and so it was subsidized by the state to ensure that these programs and local EMS agencies could be established to oversee them on a statewide basis. The responsibilities of a LEMSA, and again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but give you some idea of what local EMS agencies do: plan and implement the EMS system, coordinate and regulate EMS personnel and resources within that system, provide local independent medical oversight for the system, set local medical protocols and policies, approve EMT and paramedic training programs and continuing education for all of those personnel. We issue state EMT certification after they have successfully passed all of the requirements. We approve advanced life support, which is paramedic level ground and air operations. We designate base hospitals that provide the direction to field personnel at the scene of an emergency, trauma centers, specialty care centers such as burn centers, pediatric care centers. We oversee the quality of patient care and evaluate the EMS system. Develop exclusive operating areas such as what's been done in Calaveras County, ambulance service contracts, and trauma, quality improvement, and multi-casualty disaster plans for all of the counties. And then resolve local EMS system issues that come up on a day-to-day basis. So here we are, some 27 years after the EMS Act was put into place. And this is really how it has played out in the distribution of administration of EMS agencies. There are currently 24 single county LEMSAs within the state. And those are counties that provide their own LEMSA services. And there are 7 regions throughout the state. And this map, if I can get it to come up, shows you a distribution of those. Down in the bottom, the green area there is Inland County EMS, San Bernardino, Inyo, and Mono. The purple, mid-state, that is Central California EMS, Madera, Fresno, Kings, and Tulare. Mountain Valley, Stanislaus, Mariposa, Calaveras, Amador, and Alpine. Sierra Sac, which incidentally doesn't have Sierra or Sacramento counties within it, but that is their name. You'll see them in the yellow. The biggest region within the state, NorCal EMS, takes in all of the counties north of Yuba County, with the exception of what is North Coast, Del Norte, Humboldt, and Lake counties. And then there's the wine country, which is Coastal Valley EMS agency, 3 counties, Mendocino, Napa, and Sonoma. If you notice here that most of the counties that are in white, these are counties that are providing their own level of EMS services. These are probably the counties that, if there was not state general funding initially back in '81, would probably, the counties in white would probably would have established EMS programs on their own. A lot of the counties that we see here that are colored, that are in regions right now, probably would not have any level of paramedic service if in fact that funding was not made available. The 7 regions, and again, that was, if you look at what percentage of the state is covered by EMS regions, it's about 58% of the counties in California. That's 34 of the 58 counties are in EMS regions. 91% of the counties with a population of less than 100,000 residents, and 93 of the counties with less than 200,000 residents are in EMS regions throughout the state. All of these counties are predominantly rural, remote, or wilderness areas. Geographically, the regions cover about 66% of the state of California. Combined regional static population, even though we're talking about a lot of fairly small counties throughout the state, if you take the population of all of those collectively, our collective population is second only to Los Angeles County. So from a political standpoint, the multi-county regions certainly have a voice beyond what any single county would have if they were not involved in a region. Some of the benefits of a multi-county agency: reduced administrative and program costs by not duplicating services over and over again, a standardized system coordination of emergency response and patient flow, focus on regional EMS development and concerns, and sharing of limited EMS resources among multiple counties. And this is one of the huge advantages, is that very seldom does, in any of the rural areas, does one county have all the resources necessary to make up an EMS system. When multiple counties can be put together, you can come up with enough resources to put a system together. More effective impact of smaller counties at the state level, again, as I addressed. We as regions have a much more political clout at this point than we would as individual counties. And then matching administrative boundaries with natural response and patient flow systems. Again, there are patients that come from the scene of incidents within any one county that may be transferred to adjacent counties for trauma center, pediatric center, burn centers, etc. To be eligible, regional EMS agencies have some rules that they need to comply with. Rural multi-county agencies have to be identified with heavy non-resident EMS system use. Again, the intent here was that there are small counties within the state of California that may have a small static population, but because of tourism or traffic flows, the dynamic population is much, much higher, and that county is responsible to have a system in place to address that. It has to have 3 or more counties. 2 counties cannot make up a region. And to be eligible for the matching funds from the state general funds, there has to be a 1-to-1 match from local funding to be eligible for those dollars. There has to be a delegation of the specific health and safety code responsibilities to the by the contracted counties. In other words, a county can't say, we're going to contract with a region for these EMS services, but we're going to retain these EMS services. The whole ball of wax has to be delegated to the LEMSA. There has to be an EMS plan on file with the state EMS authority and must follow all state and federal statutes, regulations, and guidelines. A breakdown: there is currently allocated $2.4 million in state general funds to help finance multi-county agencies. The formula for the distribution of those is based upon 3 factors, really. There is a base factor that if you're a region, there's X amount of dollars associated with that. The other 2 are the number of counties that you have within your region, and then the population being served within that region. The current distribution, if you look here, are the largest county, NorCal, that has 11 counties. They receive about 22% of that pot, $2.4 million. North Coast, being the smallest, receives about 9. You'll see us right about in the middle. Mountain Valley with about 14% of that $2.4 million. That comes out to be about $347,000 annually. The question then comes up, is state funding continuing to support the legislative intent of providing and maintaining a statewide EMS system? Just a little history, state support for EMS regions, and just looking back to 1998 to the present, 1998-99 was the last state general fund augmentation that we received. There have been no incremental funds for cost of living increases or inflationary increases during that time. And since 1998-99, basic inflationary costs have increased by about 78%. So in other words, if we're doing the same job that we did back in 98, it would cost us about 78% more. But during that same time, the state has cut regions 4% annually every year since 2001. And then special project funds have been completely eliminated. There were federal block grant funds. There were federal block grant funds, and you'll see those in the yellow here, that to the tune of just over $1.5 million that were not necessarily allocated just for regions, but for any EMS agency within the state that you could apply for, any programs that you were developing at the local level. Those funds, beginning in 1999, began to diminish. They were being reduced by the federal government. What was left of those was taken by the state EMS authority to fund their program, and that has been, since 2005, has been down to zero. There's absolutely no funds available. We used to be able to get anywhere between $50,000 and $200,000 a year in those special project funds. Those have completely dried up. If you look at, again, the rate of inflation that has gone up, in 98, an allocation of $2.4 million would translate into about $3.3 million today if we were doing exactly the same job. But you see the state funding, and that's in purple here, was actually reduced in 2001 by 4% because of the economic concerns at the state level, and that has never been replaced. Again, the chart that we just looked at looks at a workload with no increase, but in fact what has happened, the regional workload increase during that period of time over the last 10 years is estimated to be over 100%. Ambulance volume has gone up 86%. The number of certified personnel that we put through the process is up 25%. The number of contracts we have, especially contracts because of homeland security issues and disaster preparedness and weapons of mass destruction, our contracts are up 114%. Exclusive operating areas in the counties within those regions is up 462%. And this board, I'm sure, remembers the amount of work involved in going through developing an exclusive operating area, up 462%. Trauma centers. In 98, we had no trauma centers. Today, we have 2 of those within our region, but again, within all the regions, up 233%. And that's not just delegation of trauma centers, but ongoing evaluation and monitoring of those centers. Training programs up 65%. New state and regional programs that have been mandated for local EMS agencies have been up 140%. So the workload has increased substantially over that period of time. Actual operating expenses we've calculated have increased about 80%. Our local funding, the monies that come from the counties, again, we're on a 41 cent per capita that each of our counties pay. So every year that goes up a little bit as the population goes up. We've also been able to increase some local fees associated with what we do. So collectively, that has gone up about 51% to try and offset some of this growing deficit. However, because there has been no increase in state funding, regional staffing, and this is all the counties in all of the regions across the state, has only increased 3.8%. A lot of the regions have actually decreased their staffing levels because of a lack of funding. This graph, if you look at the blue line at the top, this is our increase in workload that we've estimated at about 118%. Regional operating costs up 80%. The local funds, again, trying to keep up with that inflationary cost, is up about 51%. And then if you look at the bottom, the people that need to do the work, the increased workload that we've had, the staffing level, the blue line, we virtually are doing the 118% more workload with the same staffing level. The very bottom line is what we're talking about here today is the state general funds for regions. Straight line across the bottom. Have been no increase. The question that we get from the Department of Finance at the state is why can't the local funding simply be increased to offset growing deficit? Regional funding requirements pursuant to Health and Safety Code 1797-108 requires a dollar per dollar local match, 50%, 50%. The smaller counties were originally able to participate in a statewide EMS system because of this one-to-one match. However, since 1998, local funding has continually increased in all regions while state funding has been reduced. We're at a point now where the current match, instead of 50-50, is local 73%, state 27%. This is a graph showing that. The question comes back from the Department of Finance. Well, can county contributions and fees be further increased to offset the growing deficit? The problem with fees, and this is for, as an example, certification fees for EMTs and first responders, that we charge them for going through the certification process. There's a law of diminishing returns there. When fees get up to a certain point, a lot of these people are volunteers. They're doing it on their own. They're paying the cost for this, and we see a substantial drop in the number of people interested in being involved in the EMS response program when fees get too high. So we feel that the fees are as high as we can justify at this point. And county contributions, again, the majority of counties in EMS regions are smaller counties with limited tax bases relative to a small static resident population. So how does the state expenditure for regions compare to other governmental agencies on a per capita expenditure basis? And this is interesting. If you look at, again, the blue line that we, the light blue line here with the X's, that's the inflationary rate since, and we looked at this at 3 different points, 1987, 1997, and 2007. In 1987, that was our ground zero where we started, and in 1997 through 2007, you'll see that inflation rate, again, is up about 80%. The California state per capita expenditure, and again, this is the amount that the state spends on every person within the state, is slightly higher than that. They're up a little over 80% in that 20 years. Federal per capita expenditures, again, quite a ways over inflationary rates, but they've been paying for wars and things, and so that there's been added program costs to that. The purple line here is U.S. state local government per capita expenditures, and this is local governments, cities and counties throughout the United States, is up to about 130% over that 20 years. If you look at what the state has spent on local regions during that period of time, that's the dark purple line at the bottom. We started off in 1987. They were paying us 31 cents per capita. Today, 2007, they're paying us 31 cents per capita, 20 years later. EMS regions are at the crossroads. State general fund dollars have decreased. The special project EMS funds have completely dried up or not available. There are federal funds for disaster funding since 9/11. However, most of those are not earmarked specifically for EMS, and we have very few of those funds available to us. Calaveras County is probably the exception in the multiple counties that are in regions throughout the state. There has been both Homeland Security funds as well as some of the hospital emergency funds that have gone to upgrade the EMS system. But again, that's an exception, not the rule. The fiscal burden shift to local sources has been maximized. We really can't do that anymore. Operating costs and workload have skyrocketed. EMS staff size is stagnant or decreased. Well, it can't get any worse, can it? Now the state has proposed an additional 10% cut in regional contributions for this upcoming fiscal year. And again, this is the governor's across-the-board 10% cut. It's interesting that the state EMS authority, they met with the governor's office and convinced them that they are an essential service within the state. They're not getting their 10% cut. And as a matter of fact, they've actually put in a budget increase to add additional staff for next fiscal year. Somehow, at the local level, we're not considered an essential service, I guess. A failing state-local partnership, and that is a question. The good news is that in 1981, state fiscal commitment to regional EMS has helped establish advanced EMS systems in most of the rural counties within California and given us that standard of care throughout the state as you drive from county to county. The bad news is that the lack of continued commitment over the past 10 years in placing regional EMS systems is in jeopardy. We have been requesting, and this is for 4 years now, we've been requesting a $1.4 million increase. And we realize that this is certainly not the time to ask for augmentation at the state level. Again, our immediate concern is not to have the 10% cut. But an augmentation would prevent existing regions from weakening or collapsing, maintaining over 30 years of multi-county EMS system continuity, continue administrative cost savings, and ensure that the 25 rural counties maintain effective EMS systems for residents and visitors. If in fact EMS regions disappear because of the lack of funding, and again, there are some of these regions that are at the point of closing doors and telling their counties that they are on their own because of the fiscal crisis. Establish EMS systems in over 2/3 of the state and in 34 counties would be in jeopardy. The cost for abandoned counties to continue EMS will increase 3- to 4-fold just for minimal services. And again, just to put that in perspective, Calaveras County pays about $18,000 plus $18,800 per year. 4 times that, we're talking about $65,000. That would probably not give you a single staff person. It would probably be a part-time staff person with no office space, no clerical support to do the job that's being done right now. And that would impact every county, again, that's within the region now. Smaller rural counties will not be able to support the existing EMS systems, and costs to the state will increase due to more LEMSs. There are 32 LEMSs today. They would be dealing with 58 if, in fact, the regions went away. The smaller county EMS influence at the state level would be eroded. Again, we've got some political clout being combined together, and up to 6 million residents and tens of millions of tourists would likely less likely to survive medical emergencies within the system. If we had an increase, and again, I'm not going to go through this, but again, it would turn several of those things around. The immediate concern we have right now is that an additional 10% decrease in state funding for regional EMS agencies for next fiscal year would result in an immediate reduction or elimination of, and this is within our region as well as all of the rest of the state, public information and education programs. We have actually cut those already. These are programs that tell people when it's appropriate to call 911 and when it's appropriate to make go to your local physician. And again, those programs reduce the amount of ED visits significantly, and without the programs, again, we're seeing overcrowding of emergency departments throughout the state. System monitoring of training programs, ambulance services, et cetera, that we do on a day-to-day basis to ensure that those training programs and ambulance services are equipped and staffed and are doing the job that they're required to do by state law. Data collection, reporting and analysis, quality improvement programs. These are the programs that really look to see how we're doing in the medical care that's provided. Unfortunately, when you cut these, you become blind to what is actually happening out there, and you can have significant breaches in patient care, and nobody knows about it because nobody's looking at it. Training and CE programs would have to be reduced. Disaster and weapons of mass destruction preparedness planning and drills, again, would be reduced. What we're asking at this point, how can your organization help? We're asking to join the 7 EMS regions by writing letters of support for long overdue state general fund augmentation, and specifically to oppose the 10% cut that we're looking at for next fiscal year. Any questions at this point?
So Steve, you are, this is a request being made to most, if not all, counties that are involved in the legislation.
We are making a presentation with all our member counties. We actually did make this presentation at our board meeting, and we've been asked to make it at the individual.
Right, and that's why, just so you know how Steve got to be here, I've been on this board for our Mountain Valley Emergency Medical Services since I've been on this board. And this presentation was made at our last board meeting. And over the last 3.5 years, I can see that many of the people that work for the county, elected officials, and basically the public are probably not aware of why we have the local emergency medical system and when it started and what it does, et cetera, and for that reason may not realize how important this is. And so Steve, Mr. Andrews has got together with our CAO and came up and made this presentation so that you folks and somebody watching this on television could see how critical it is. Obviously, the cost of doing business has increased, like with most businesses, and the funding has gone downhill steadily for years and years and years. And what it basically means, folks, when we talk about emergency medical services, the people that talk to me anyway, most of them, what pops into their mind is an ambulance going code 3 down the road. That is essential, but it's a very small part of it. What you have to understand is what is in that ambulance, for one thing. Not only the equipment, but the personnel adequately trained and to do, as they say, to do the right thing when they get there. But above that, we have EMTs and paramedics throughout this county that work for various first responders, essentially fire departments, et cetera. Their training goes off. You're not going to get those people either. This is one of those things where people don't think of this day to day, but when you have a medical emergency in your family or your workplace, you expect, most people have come to expect, fast response, and with that response, quality care, not only in the field en route to the hospital, but once you get to the hospital. And the way it looks right now is this service is hanging by a thread. The fuel tank is empty. We're running on fumes. And so that's why you've asked Steve to come up here and ask this board for support for a letter exempting the lenses from this 10% cut. But go ahead, Steve, if somebody has questions.
Anybody have a question?
Yes, I do.
Marita?
First, I would be if I was an EMS local agency, I'd be offended that the state didn't lobby on behalf of the local agencies just for themselves. That would tell me that maybe we don't need them. I would find that, if I was in your agency, very offensive. What did the Legislative Analyst's Office recommend? Did they recommend the 10%? I mean, my concern is this is just something the governor threw out. Everybody's reacting. We have the May revised. The LAO came out with something which was very different than the governor's. And so at what point do we jump on the bandwagon and push?
We have been testifying before the Senate and Assembly budget committees and And again, as we testify, there are multiple other agencies that are there with basically the same story. The concern is, and the thing that so long story short is basically they're saying, we understand you've got a problem, but we have a major fiscal problem with the state, and so therefore, we're voting for the cut. The concern is, if we had actually been funded appropriately over all of these years, then I'd say, we should take our 10% cut like everybody else is taking. But that hasn't been the case. And again, that's been a tough one to get across. Department of Finance certainly is strongly lobbying for the cut for us. They have not been supportive. And again, that's why we're trying to make these presentations and get support from them.
So the Legislative Analyst's Office did not make a recommendation?
They have made a recommendation that there be a 10% cut, yes.
The same as the governor's?
Yes.
Okay. And have the local agencies looked at starting to combine? I mean, it was similar to what we talked about with CCWD, that, we have 5, maybe we go to 7. What's the impact of this on Tuolumne, since Tuolumne's been flatlined since, I think you said, 98? What are they looking to come in, and so then there's a larger...
Again, the JPA that forms our agency is formed by our member counties, and there have been talks, I think, with the board, our governing board, about looking at additional counties. But again, if in fact there is no increase in the pot, what's going to happen is another county comes in, and it's going to reduce the amount of funding for everybody else because you're taking, a bigger hit. So.
But you're taking their funding. If Tuolumne came in, for example, then you would get their funding. They would then be...
Tuolumne has no funding. Single counties are not eligible for this. It's only regional EMS agencies.
So you're not looking at the regions expanding?
Not at this point, because again, if there was another county that was interested in joining, then certainly we would look at that. However, an agreement that we have among the local EMS, the regional agencies, is that if an additional county comes into any of our regions, that we would have them come in with the legislative support to add enough funding so nobody takes a negative hit at any of the other agencies.
And as I understood, you're not getting any of the Homeland Security dollars?
Historically, we have not, and again, if you look at all the counties within those regions, for the most part, they're not getting those funds. Again, Calaveras has been an exception to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Russ?
Yeah, that's one of the paradoxes that I haven't had it explained to me, how I think I heard you say that Calaveras County contributes $18,800 annually to the functionality of this local, of your organization, yet Tuolumne stands alone. They don't get funding, but they don't have to make expenditures either, and it really, I'd like to have somebody explain to me how Tuolumne justified making that decision.
They just did, Russ. I mean, we could do that if we wanted to, and not to interrupt, but since I've been on the board, we actually have looked into that a couple of times, the admin office, and it has come to we're required to have an emergency medical services agency. I don't know what level of service Tuolumne provides or what the cost is to that, but the estimates for Calaveras County to go off on their own and do it were somewhere in the area of $250,000 to $275,000, as opposed to $18,000 and some change to belong. So that's why I'm assuming that's why all of the local emergency medical services agencies went together, so that they could get this funding, because you're not qualified to get that state funding unless you're in one of these LEMSs. So we could just vote to do that, but we would have to establish our own agency And
Yeah, well, that's-
I believe twice since we looked into it, the cost was about that same amount of money.
That's what seemed odd to me. But, and the other thing is that you mentioned the logic in having counties that are in close proximity together, but that North County, or the North Coast area, has Lake County that looks like it's 100 miles removed from the other couple of counties. That's odd.
Well, and again, it's, Sierra Sac has not Sierra or Sacramento in it, because they did at one time, and they had either changed regions or in Sacramento actually left the region and went off on their own. So there have been changes historically over the years in the membership of the regions, and yeah, North Coast is kind of a strange one, being non-contiguous.
Okay, that's all I have.
Other comments, questions? I have a couple of questions. I'm wondering whether you're working with RCRC or CSAC, and what positions have been taken so far, and what level of support are you getting?
RCRC has been extremely supportive. They've been, every time that we've been in Sacramento testifying before either Senate or Budget, Assembly Budget Committee, they've been there. They've been writing letters. We've met with them several times. Very, very supportive. And again, of the 32 counties within the regions, I believe that 30 of those are within RCRC. So, they have a real vested interest here, and again, have been very supportive. Judith Regal from CSAC, their legislative analyst, is also, we have her on contract for our State EMS Administrators Association. So she's been very helpful also from that standpoint on the legislative side. So working closely with both of them.
I have another question. The proposed letter that we have before us goes to Assemblywoman Byrd. However, we do have some close relations with other folks in the Senate, and I'm just wondering whether we want to give a heads up to a broader group of folks.
I would say whoever you feel that needs to see this, we would certainly appreciate relaying that information.
Okay. Is there a motion on this, or?
I'll make the motion to pass a minute order authorizing the board chair, that would be you, to sign a letter opposing the proposed 10% reduction in state general fund contribution to multi-county EMS agencies, and requesting increases in the current state funding for that purpose.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes on 4-0 vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Steve.
Andrews. We now move to review of correspondence, reports, and various matters of concern. Let's start with Marita today.
I have Council of Governments this week, Area 12, and I will be going to the solid waste presentation on Thursday afternoon. Those are my board appointed committees.
Russ?
Okay, this isn't a board appointed responsibility, but I do want to mention that I'll be going to the Calaveras Chamber's first session of the Calaveras Leadership Program starting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock up at Murphy's Suites. And then, as you know, we would go first Wednesday of every month for the next 9 months to different locations around the county. There's an important meeting in Sacramento tomorrow, on Thursday, that I unfortunately can't go to, but it's for discussing the conditions of, or the sources of aggregate, construction aggregate for future state needs for infrastructure. And I don't know whether if there's any board member here that would be interested in attending that. It's a local government type of a forum, and I've long contended that we have some opportunities here with all the mine waste that is on top of the ground. Some of it's classified and sort of sitting out there without value placed on it. But I think that as the state gets serious about expanding its highway systems and some of their construction projects, we could be sitting on a lot of saleable resource that I talked to Supervisor Murrison over in Tuolumne County. She's going to be going to this meeting. So anyway, I just want to point that out. If you've seen anything on the emails about that meeting, it might be one that would be worthwhile. I cannot go to it. That's all of my board-appointed responsibilities for this week.
Thank you. Tom?
I will also be attending the COG meeting tomorrow evening. That's it.
Nope.
Nothing to report.
I've got a couple of things. Today I have the Mental Health Board at 4. I have the traditional lick and stick for the West Point Scholarship Association tonight at the Community Covenant Church in West Point. Wednesday through Friday, I'll be in Washington, D.C. with our amended mission, and looking forward to joining the CAO and I believe the undersheriff on that effort. And I also have 2 reports to make from events. I went to the Mental Health Board training down in Modesto on last Friday and Saturday, and found some very interesting things underway in counties that are near to us, Amador and some initiatives in both Tuolumne and Mariposa, as well as Stanislaus counties, toward getting a mental health court going. Some of these already had them going, and others were in process. What this does, it's similar to drug court, where it takes people who really should be in a rehab or recovery mode out of the jail as long as they are maintaining their programs. And we have had a number of our correctional officers and sheriff personnel express concerns about how many folks in their jail appear to be sort of the jails become the last institution of resort for dealing with some of folks with mental health issues. And so the drug court was seen as a way of diverting some folks with dual diagnosis issues, but the mental health court in other counties is seen as a way of both saving money and getting people to the right sources of assistance. And my hope is that we might begin to take a close look at that in coming years. It was one of the subjects in the last year's mental health report. I think it may be timely for the board to begin some discussions toward that, and I would hope we could look at that later in the year. Secondly, an extraordinary event happened on Saturday. Coming back from that, approximately 2/3 of the people of West Point, you may recall a discussion about the litigation and the threat and layoffs of West Point firefighters as a result of litigation. We had 2/3 of people either bought tickets or showed up, and they raised $20,000 in one night. Wow. In a fundraising event, which has got the fire department back on its feet. So it was a remarkable outpouring, just a massive display of community support. It really makes you realize just how special these communities are. This is a town not known for its wealth, but it is now known for its generosity. And that's all I have to report. Bob.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday this week, I'll be with the chair and the undersheriff meeting with our legislative representatives and/or their staffs in Washington. And that's what I've got for this week.
All right, Council?
Nothing, thank you.
All right, that would conclude the open portion of the meeting. If there are no comments about matters in closed session from the public, this meeting is now adjourned. We have, moving on to our study session, we have the Environmental Management Agency to talk about mosquito and vector control program, and I imagine this will be the unveiling of the poll information that we've taken. So, Brian, take it away.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to update the board this afternoon on the Calaveras County Mosquito and Vector Control Program. Joining me today to my right is John Bliss with SCI. Accompanying him today out in the audience actually is Jeanette Henson. And to my left, of course, is Marty Scholl, who does our mosquito and vector control program, along with Paul Eads, who's the gentleman in the hat in the audience. Today's study session, we're going to be discussing updating the board on the results of the countywide opinion survey conducted by SCI Consulting for property-related assessment, or Prop 218, for development of a mosquito and vector control district. Staff will be seeking informal direction from the board as it applies to future SCI Consulting services and district formation. So to begin with, as a program recap, the mosquito and vector control program began during the 2005-2006 fiscal year in response to the threat of West Nile virus. In excess of $200,000 has been provided through the State Department of Public Health to supplement resources for local mosquito control efforts to mitigate the threat of West Nile virus transmission. On the bottom right there is Marty out there fishing for our mosquito fish in our fish tank down at La Contenta. The board will remember we had an MOU with CCWD, and on the left is Paul Eads doing some work in a lab. The current program encompasses a full-service mosquito and vector control program. Since the winter of 2007, staff have implemented an aggressive tick surveillance and public education program as part of Lyme disease awareness and surveillance. And the gentleman you see on the right there is Mr. Mark Novak with the State Department of Public Health. He's also out in the audience today, flagging for ticks. Staff go out, flag for ticks, collect the ticks, and send them in to determine as to whether those ticks are actually carrying the causative agent for Lyme disease. New lab equipment has been purchased to aid in mosquito and tick information and identification, along with West Nile and other virus disease testing. Mosquito fish rearing equipment and facilities have been set up in conjunction with CCWD MOUs that the board approved approximately 2 years ago. You see Mr. Eads there looking through a dissecting scope, which is what we have purchased with some of those funds from the state. Very interesting piece of equipment, actually, because not only can you look through it, but it also has, as you see, the lights in the TV cameras in it, and you can actually display what you're looking at through the lenses on your CRT on your computer. Kind of gives you a bigger picture of a tick or a mosquito if they're identifying a species of mosquito as an example, and they're trying to pick it out among the different species. Mosquito and tick collection, identification, and disease testing, as well as control activities, continue throughout the county. Staff continues to educate the public about personal protection and the importance of mosquito and vector control measures within the county. Staff also continues to experience very positive responses from the community when responding to mosquito and other vector control concerns. You see the photo on the bottom left, there's actually a picture from the booth that we had set up last year at the Home and Garden Show. Very, very effective way of getting the information out there about this new program. Actually, the Environmental Management Agency, and more specifically environmental health staff, mosquito vector and even on-site sewage. We'll be sponsoring another booth at Home and Garden this coming year shortly, so that we can continue to do public outreach among the different programs that we do in environmental management. During an April 3rd, 2007 study session, the board directed staff to pursue the feasibility of hiring a consultant to determine whether there would be enough community support to develop a special district for the control of mosquitoes and other vectors in Calaveras County. Staff, in turn, developed, and county administration then sent out a request for a proposal for benefit assessment consulting services on June 21, 2007, almost a year ago. SCI consultants have completed their survey, reported favorable results, and will discuss the results in greater detail as part of today's study session. Continuing our review, the RFP requested the consultants submit cost breakdowns for 3 specific phases of the project. The 3 phases included public opinion research, which has been completed. That is the survey, and that's phase 1. Assessment information, which is balloting for purposes of the finances and the fiscal analyst end of it. We actually broke it into phase 2A and phase 2B, and we'll discuss that a little bit more further on. And then finally, administration of the assessments in future years, which is actually phase 3. So looking at the activities, public opinion research was a cost of $23,500 as approved by the board and actually taken from contingencies at the direction of the board. Assessment information under phase 2A and B are $14,500 respectively and $64,400. The $14,500 involves what is called an engineer's report. The $64,400 is actually the actual balloting. I know John's going to speak to this in greater detail and give you the reasoning behind actually taking those as a lump sum rather than breaking them out like we've done from the fiscal side of it. Yeah, just because this is such a key slide for your decision making today, I wanted to spend a couple minutes with you and kind of tell you the good and the bad and the risk, the financial risk that you all need to understand to make a good decision. The $23,500 is money spent, and that was for the survey, and we're going to go over the results here, and that's obviously important to your decision making. Phase A and B, we broke it into 2 phases, or 2 parts, the engineer's report and the balloting, but I want to be as clear as I can. Don't do A and not do B. When you make a decision, essentially there's no real value to the county of doing the engineer's report and not doing the balloting. The engineer's report is a document that is a legal requirement and supports the balloting. And those 2 add up to about $79,000, and you're already in $23,500. If, in the unlikely event you went forward with the balloting and it was not successful, the county would have spent $23,579, and that's money that you won't see again. If it is successful, the assessment itself will be, in fact, it's required that it's used to pay back these particular costs. And there's some additional costs, which are the administrative costs of the assessment, and that's those lower numbers, the $19,500 and the $19,500 in subsequent years. And again, those costs are paid for by the assessment itself. So I always like to just be as clear as I can and not sugarcoat things. The top 3 numbers there are the amount the county would be is at risk assigned to the political risk that I'll talk about when I talk about my results. Thank you, John. And again, just to reaffirm that, it's important to note that costs incurred by the district and not county general funds for fiscal years 08, 09, and 09, 010 for the administration of the assessments in future years. So next steps. The primary decision for the board to consider at this juncture is whether to move forward with SCI consulting and implementation of phase 2A and the creation of an engineer's report on implementation of this phase. Under this phase, the consultant is charged with preparation of a comprehensive detailed plan for a ballot measure, This is why John was stating that we really need to take the two together. It is designed to include revenue projections, parcel data, and services to be provided to each parcel type. As Environmental Health Land Use Trust Funds, the board may remember we proposed to use those for the $23,500 initially. Those monies are still out there, shall we say, but as Shirley Lyon is fond of saying, that those are actually general fund dollars, and they are. So as Environmental Health Land Use Trust Funds will likely be dedicated to another agency, staff is requesting that other options be considered for use and funding should the board move forward. This phase, including general funds or solid waste trust funds. Should the board approve the engineer's report under Phase 1A and decide to proceed with the ballot measures, staff will return to the board to consider Phase 2B. Actually, we would really modify that and ask the board to consider A and B together today. Phase 2B includes, in part, the mail-out ballot, and ultimately will determine as to whether a special benefit assessment is accepted by the voters and therefore passes by a weighted majority of responding property owners. The good part is, I know John gave you the caution that the board definitely needs to be aware of. The good part is should an assessment be approved under Phase 2B of the project, the first obligation of the district will be to pay back all debts incurred in implementation of Phases 1 and 2. So our recommendation is to have the board direct staff to return with a resolution accepting Phase 2A or Phase 2A and 2B of the RFP as submitted by SCI. And by the way, that's been put up in your areas in front of your chairs before the meeting. As submitted by SCI Consulting Group, and proceed with we're recommending $16.50 per single family equivalent ballot measure. John will speak to this in much greater detail. And so with that said, we now move to the second phase of today's study session with SCI presenting results of the public opinion research.
Ryan, may I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
You just addressed. You say Phase 2B includes the mail-out ballot and ultimately will determine as to whether a special benefit assessment is accepted by the voters and therefore passes by a weighted majority of responding property owners. What do you define a weighted majority?
Let me address that. It's an excellent question. So let me give you a little background. Each property will be assigned a proposed assessment amount. And you'll often hear me talk about this $16.50, but I want to be clear. That's the rate for a single-family home on an acre or less. For example, a vacant lot, and I don't know the specific amount we tested right now, I can look that up, a vacant lot would be less than that. It might be $3 or $4. A commercial lot would be more. And so every parcel in the county is assigned a proposed assessment. Ballots are printed then with that assessment amount on it. Let's say I own one house here in the county. It would have my name and address, my parcel number, and $16.50 on it. Let's say Brian owns 3 houses. So he has, his ballot will actually have 3 parcel numbers and $16.50 3 times. And we both participate. The returned ballots are counted, and they are weighted by the proposed assessment in the following way. I have 16.5 votes, and now I'm going to have to do some math. He has 49.5 votes. So it's the proposed assessment amounts in dollars is the weighting power that each ballot has. Does that make sense? And this is all laid out.
It's really interesting watching you explain that to the citizenry.
Okay.
And one comment I have is I have an awfully hard time supporting something that's going to assess vacant land. I mean, we're doing this for people. We're not doing it for vacant land.
Okay.
And because you have a vacant parcel or big parcel or a ranch or a vineyard or something, and we're going to go out and start assessing you by parcel numbers in agricultural operations by the number of parcels you have, I don't think that makes any sense at all.
And these are all excellent things to bring up. Let me address a couple of those concerns. One of the ones...
Actually, if I might suggest that, are you complete with your presentation? Why don't we hear the presentation out?
Okay.
There's going to be a lot of discussion as we've kind of foreshadowed here, but why don't
These
you
are good
finish?
issues to talk about.
Why don't you finish this? Take those questions, make a note of them, and we will get into that discussion about strategies and how this community might respond. Some of us might raise a similar election that's happened and is now in litigation in West Point. There's a lot of information, but let's do that after your presentation.
Okay. So this is our presentation. Our objectives were to identify property owner support, desires, and priorities regarding vector-borne disease control services and measure the level of support here locally in the county. We mailed out to 11,000 property owners. Our survey sample was randomly, there's about just under 50,000 parcels in the county, so we randomly selected the 11,000 and mailed to those. And we tested 3 different rates. That is, a third of this 11,000 were printed at the $11.50 rate, a third were at the $16.50, and a third were at $21.50, so that we could return and give you guys the levels of support at different dollar thresholds. We mailed in January 08. Responses tabulated through March 4th, 2008. We got excellent response. So typically, and we do these surveys all the time, we typically will see a 15 to 25% response. You got about a 30% response. So your response was better than we expected and better than we typically see. And that response rate, or the size of that respondent pool, that 2302, affects your margin of error. And a 1.6 is a very good margin of error. So we have a very high level of confidence in our results. And then we weighted the survey results. We'll talk a little bit more about the weighting and some of the issues with that. But we weighted those so that we could model and present report results to you that we think are accurate and realistic. This is just real quickly, gives you a sense of who holds the vote. You can see 66% by single-family residential. That's the largest group. Then we have some ag, we have some investment property, some business and industrial, as well as some large property owners. Now, this is the second most important slide I'm going to show you, and I want to spend a couple minutes with this. This is not the overall level of support. This is the level of support we've extracted just to give you guys a datum, only the single-family homeowners. So that's the man on the street, the common resident. It's not the person that may own property here and live somewhere else. These are the levels of support of the Calaveras County resident. And you can see there's something interesting going on here. First of all, each bar will show, this is the $11.50, a $16.50, and $21.50. These are the level of supports. Typically, this graph starts high on the left and goes down to the right, because typically you'll see higher levels of support at lower dollars amount. I want this for less money, it's going to be higher. What we saw in this case is virtually no what we call price sensitivity. So all of these dollar amounts were well supported by your single-family homeowners. We believe, now we've done some tests in counties that are similar to the degree possible that there are similar counties in the state of California, but some similar counties, and we've seen good support up to about $19, $20, $21, and then we see a drop-off. So we assume that if you had tested $30 or $40, we would see a decay in the support. We thought we would see higher, to be perfectly honest with you, we thought we'd see higher support at $11.50. So we're seeing the good and the bad of it is solid support. Everyone's above 60% of the single-family homeowners, and that's about what we would typically see up and down the state. But we're not seeing 70% here, and but on the other hand, we're not seeing a low level of support there. So solid support, not great price sensitivity. Now, this one is the most important slide because this includes the ag, the vacant lot, the commercial, everyone all into the pool here. And these are the support levels that we think you would actually get if you balloted today. And some of the statements are true. In fact, it's unusual to see a hump in the middle. Usually you would see, again, a higher level and it would go down like this. Often, in fact, in virtually every case, the single-family homeowners by themselves, that subgroup, are about 5 percentage points higher than the overall, and that's about what you saw here. So that's not unusual because other property types typically are somewhat less supported. Again, solid support. We typically will tell our clients to go forward at 54, 55%. We've had great success up and down the state in a number of cases. In fact, in most cases, we have had great success with 56% support. So we feel solidly, and as Brian already kind of cut to the chase, we're going to recommend that you consider going forward at the $16.50. It's above the 55% we like. It's below $20. There's some nice things about it. But again, your support isn't overwhelming, but it is solid. And at these dollar amounts, there is support for it here in Calaveras County. The next three slides are more just to give you perspective. We wouldn't read too much into it, and they're all kind of typically what we see. Anything to do with health and disease control, that kind of stuff, vectors, and this is certainly that type of issue, we see greater support with seniors. And so we're seeing this. You're seeing a nice looking, very typical curve here that anyone 65 and over was very supportive. You got support all along there. So that looks very, very nice. This is by political party and race. So the D is one Democrat, 2D is two Democrats in the House, MX is a Democrat and a Republican, OR is everything else, and it does include the declines to state, which is very common now in California. One Republican, two Republican. Again, broad-based support, fairly strong along all of the different groups, slightly higher in the Democrats than the Republicans. In the Republicans, you see a little drop off in the higher rates for Republicans. This is also an interesting one. This is how many years they've owned that property. And so often we see people that are new to a community, sometimes this is frustrating to people, but people that are new to a community tend to be more supported. Particularly, like here in Calaveras County, if they've moved from an area that has a high level of government services, they tend to have expectation of more government services. They've paid more for their house, and so it's their big investment, and this is a relatively small amount of money for their big investment. So we see a slight but noticeable decay in levels of support as you have lived here for a longer period of time. These are all people from 0 to 4 years, 5 to 9 years, up like that. So that's also kind of typically what we see. And I apologize, this is too hard, too small to see, and I'm just going to touch on a couple of them. In the survey itself, the main question was at top, but then we posed 12 questions to people to kind of drill down and see what was important to them within this. And you can see we use this 60% line here. We usually report everything above that as being well supported. In this case, we had actually two negative arguments, which were we already pay enough taxes and we should be spending our dollars on other issues. So we would expect low support there, and we saw that. But so let's just talk about the first 10 of them. The top one is one that in virtually every survey we do, and we do different versions of this, is either the first or second one. And it's really a fiscal responsibility question. And we're trying to measure the level of cynicism, if you will, or belief in government spending. And the language in this one was only 5% of proceeds from a local mosquito control assessment would be used for administration. 95% used for services. This is not tying you to do that or anything like that, but it's a concept that we measured, and we got people were very interested in fiscal responsibility. The second one is very key to one of the main services that is being proposed: reduce mosquito populations using environmentally safe methods. We think this one tested high. Anything to reduce mosquito populations, and the keywords environmentally safe are very key. We used to find just those. That word was very strong in the urban counties, but for about the last 3 or 4 years, we can go into some of the most rural counties in the state: Alpine County, Modoc County, these very rural counties, and we'll get extremely high levels of support when we mention environmentally safe. What it's telling is all Californians are very, very concerned and very interested in environmentally safe services. Continue the control of mosquitoes and diseases they carry. That's just kind of the core message. It's good to see it test so high. This is the one. Lyme disease is a very, very serious issue here in the county, and it was also good to see, and it's to the credit of the agency and Marty in particular, the education he's done on Lyme disease. This is extremely well supported. This now, we get into the middle of the pack: mosquito surveillance, testing for diseases. Stable funding source usually is somewhere in the middle of the pack. Unfortunately, oftentimes anything with the word educate, and we all know how important that is, doesn't test particularly well. It's still above 50%, but it's not quite 60%. And then this has to do with some of the phone-in and online services, and then yard and home evaluations. This is not a graph that should direct in any way the decisions that public health officials and staff make on how they should do their job. Rather, it's a measurement of what the community puts monetary value on, good and bad. And we can see, unfortunately, we're not where we want to be. We need more education of people so that they understand how important education is. Then we also invite people to write comments on the back, okay? So about 10% of the respondents wrote comments on the back, and I wanted to go over these a little bit and then give you some additional information that didn't come through, unfortunately, in the presentation. I'm going to find my list. I brought a list of the comments themselves, which I will find here in a minute. Essentially, the comments, we divided them into two groups. The people that had said no on the survey, they weren't in supportive of this. The top 3 things were: we pay enough in taxes, spend money on more pressing issues, and the property owner should be responsible for this. We often get many more comments from people that are not supportive than people are supportive. And we got this today, or got this on your survey. Essentially, over 100 people responded to the survey saying that they thought we paid enough taxes already. So these were, and I think it was 30 and 30, about 30 on each of these. The yes comments, we typically don't get nearly as many people writing comments when it's yes, and that was true here. All of these were less than 15. Even though this is in support, less than 15 people responded. It is a reasonable amount for an important service. I will support it if 5% goes to the administration. I would vote yes if I was sure the assessment would not go up. I hesitate to have people read too much into this, because really of the several thousand respondents, only 10 or 15 replied with each of these, whereas these we should take very seriously. This was over 100, so like 5% of the respondents felt strongly enough that they would turn the survey over, write we pay enough taxes on the back before they send it to us. We need to put some weight and understand those no comments well. So let's go over quickly the findings. As I kind of said, we feel that the $16.50 is something that you all should consider seriously as you make this decision on whether to go forward or not. That would bring in, the $16.50 would bring in about $470,000, and that number meshes well with the budgeting that Marty and Brian have gone. They'll talk about that more. But so we think that the political support is there. It generates a good amount of money. The priorities of the program would have to be fiscal responsibility. We get that loud and clear, both from the people that were no as well as the people that were yes. Environmentally friendly control methods, you guys are already well on your way and already are excellent in the practice there. However, that needs to be messaged clearly. And then the simple, straightforward message, control vector populations and the diseases they carry. I think I've got one slide. So consider moving forward at 1650 or less. Establish a timeline for balloting. And I want to talk to that a little bit because before you today, you can make the decision, you know, we've reviewed everything and we decide not to go forward. That's a reasonable decision. You can make a decision, we want to think about it some more, or you can make a decision to go forward today. And the reason I bring it up is the timeline, we are at a point with the timeline that we would, if possible, like a decision sooner than later, if you would like to go forward this May with the balloting. We think the May time is a good time to ballot. Families are still around. People haven't left for the summer or anything, and the weather is nice. And if you ballot in May, you would be able to complete the process by August 10th. And August 10th is the Calaveras County Auditor's deadline to put any assessment or fee or tax on the property taxes. So if we made a decision sooner rather than later, we'd be able to develop a timeline, go forward with the balloting, and actually the funding would be come here in December of this year or January of next year. If we miss that August 10th date, if you all decide, hey, we want to think about it or spend some more time, we could miss that August 10th of 2008 date, and then the next opportunity we would have to have the assessment on a property tax bill would be August 10th of 2009. So it would delay the funding for a year. So that's something that to consider as you make your decision. And then the other important thing is to develop and implement a strong community outreach strategy. Fortunately, you're in a situation, and we work with agencies all the time that do this. And fortunately, you're in a situation, in fact, Marty was telling me, I think was it this week or last week, you had several hundred fourth graders at an ag day at the fairgrounds. That kind of stuff it's super important for community outreach. But we would work with you, and you already have established a great relationship with local media on this, and those factors are huge going forward. We want to make sure that we were honest and straightforward, we were clear on the method, and kind of do the nuts and bolts things you need to be successful and develop a good community outreach. And I believe that's my last slide. So we're happy to discuss any and all elements of this.
Okay, I'd like to open it up first to questions, and then we can do a round of comments. Are there people in the audience that wish to address this issue as well? Okay, well, we'll take it to the board then. Any questions?
Well, John, getting back to Supervisor Tryon's comment about explaining the weighted portion of this or issue here, I'm still not quite sure I understand. I do understand you're going to put an assessment fee on these parcels as relative to their use.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure I understand how you weight. If a person has a 1 acre parcel, one parcel that is 1,000 acres.
Okay.
Or if you have 1,000 acres of 1 acre parcels.
Right. Good question. And let me kind of address that, and I also want to address some questions. You had some excellent questions about why are we assessing ag at all? Why are we assessing a vacant lot? And I'll try to address those. I don't know. The rules of this are established by Prop 218 as well as kind of the universe of mosquito assessments up and down the state. So we have some latitude. It's not like a tax where we can really make decisions and say, well, we don't want to assess those people. There's an underlying responsibility in this engineer's report that you find special benefit. So we have some latitude, but we also have kind of a legal structure as to how we can assign assessments. We typically find, when we look at an assessment, we will go through a series of analysis based on ultimately how many humans are on that property, because that's most of the benefit for mosquito and vector control goes straight to humans. There's some animals, some other things that I'm going to talk about with a vacant lot. But so we come up with these sets of this methodology. Without giving you the specific penny amounts at this point, in general terms, if you had, let's say, a large 1,000-acre parcel, and it has a home on it, and it's mostly timberland or rangeland, let's say, we would evaluate it in the following way. We would charge them, if we went ahead with $16.50, they would start with $16.50 for that house. And then there would be a very low rate. It's pennies, it may be a couple pennies per acre for the subsequent acres above that. Because we do argue that there's not much benefit, but those other acres do receive some benefit from the mosquito and vector control. There are some people that go into that 1,000 acres. The occasional, maybe it's only every 10 or 20 years, if there's a large timber sale, there may be for 2 or 3 weeks 20 people there with truck drivers and skidders and all that kind of stuff. So there is some benefit that they would receive. So we first categorize each of the properties into a group. And in fact, the group of the one we're talking about now we call rangeland plus residence. So the formula is that base times for the residence times a rate per acre. If there wasn't a residence on it, it would simply be the penny, that very small rate per acre. If the owner owned 1,000 one-acre parcels, and it was also rangeland and timberland, we would take that same rate and multiply it by the same number of acres. So the assessment amount would be the same. And we're talking about extreme examples, but unfortunately, we can only print 14 parcels on a ballot, so the person would get 200 ballots. We'd make a special, we might have a special case in that particular, but you get that idea. So it should be the same, and that it should be the same and not really be completely related to whether they have parcels. It's the benefit of that particular property. One of the tough situations that you brought up is, hey, let's talk about a vacant lot. There's rarely someone there. Occasionally someone might walk across that vacant lot, but how do you look at a vacant lot at 10 or 20%? Let's say it's 10 to 20% of that. So let's say it's $1.65 for that vacant lot. And I was probably a little cavalier in the use of the word vacant, because when we say vacant lot, we don't mean a rural piece of property that is not close to any urbanized area. We would assign that timber or rangeland rate, that very low rate. To us, a vacant lot is a lot that is in some sort of residential development, but that hasn't been built on. So we're arguing that lot receives benefit by making it more attractive to build a house because it's receiving these services. So if there's 100 houses in a development and one guy has a vacant lot, well, Marty's over there treating that whole neighborhood. And we think anyway, our finding typically is that it's reasonable to think that vacant lot does get more than a couple cents worth of benefit, because it benefits from the intense service that whole area is getting. And so that I hope I've started to address the ag question. The other question you had, and it's a good one, and it's one of the biggest challenges with an assessment, is how do we educate people and get them to feel that this process is credible and that they understand it? Assessments are common, but I'm the first to admit, and we do about 75% assessments and about 25% taxes. A lot of our time is spent explaining how assessments work. That question of weighted balloting. What we have learned, though, is, and in your case, I think it was 65 or 70% of the people are single-family homes. So 65 to 70% of the ballots will actually just be printed with $16.50 on it. And so most of the people are just going to get a simple type ballot, and they read in the newspaper it was $16.50, and it'll be $16.50. The other 30%, let's talk about a little bit, because they are property owners that may own multiple vacant lots, they may own large parcels, and we will want to do some additional outreach to them. The ballot information often will say, how much per acre for timberland, so we give them the tools to be able to understand how it was calculated. And we haven't had too many issues with that. We have phone numbers, and after a balloting go out, and as well as before, we're happy to hold public meetings. We explain it in the newspaper, and we have a 1-800 number where people can call us and ask us questions. What will often happen is a property owner may own one house, 2 big timberland parcels, maybe a vacant lot that they're going to build by a lakefront vacant lot, and they'll call because they may get 5 or 6 different lines on their ballot, and they'll want to know how it was all calculated, and we go through it with them and tell them how it was calculated. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but hopefully I addressed some of the issues and some of your concerns.
Okay, so if it's not a single-family residence, then the assessment isn't necessarily by parcel. It's by acreage and use.
Yeah,
unless it's a vacant lot within a residential subdivision.
Yeah, let me give you a little more detail on that, because that's exactly right. A vacant lot within a residential subdivision is the use, and that will be one fixed amount. Okay. Most single-family homes will be one fixed amount. You do have a considerable number of single-family homes, as you know, on more than an acre. So those people would get they'd get the $16.50 and then a little bit more per acre, that premium. So it's first based on use, then on acreage. Now this isn't a big issue in your county, but the other attribute we look at is if you have apartment buildings, it is based on the number of units in that apartment building. So the 3 attributes we typically use are use, acreage, and apartment units to calculate these assessments.
Okay, while we're on the question of the election and the balloting, there was an election, and I'm not sure it's under the same statute, but it may be similar, in the West Point Fire District, and there were specific elements of that I want to check in relation to this. The first is, I'm assuming from your initial reaction to the polling that this is a 50% election, not a 2/3.
Correct.
All right, so there's the issue of whether you're getting around a tax issue, which is, as a process issue, comes up around here from time to time. Secondly, in that particular case, because of the need to inspect the ballots and weight them, there was no secrecy of ballot, and that was an issue, and I'm wondering whether that's present here.
Okay.
Thirdly, there was a requirement in that statute for a public hearing prior to the counting of the vote, which allowed people to, after hearing what their neighbors and what people said, to switch their vote if they wished and pull the ballots out and to correct that. So I'm curious whether those 3 things are
let me address those. Those are all excellent issues that we need. You all need to get comfortable with on your decision-making process. And so let me talk about all 3 of them, because they all have something very in common. They are all requirements of Proposition 218. So Proposition 218 in 96 said, here's how you're going to do assessments. A fire assessment is actually driven by some language in the government code, whereas this is driven by the health and safety. So there's those little differences, but everything funnels through that Prop 218. So that's the important thing. There has been criticism by taxpayers associations that you're going to use the assessment, that 50% threshold, to get around the Prop 13 2/3. And let me briefly talk about that. And this is also an issue that we talk about. We want to be very honest and straightforward with it. Both methods were created by the Jarvis Taxpayers Association, so they set the rules for both of them. So it's often funny when someone says, well, you're trying to get around the Jarvis rules. No, we're not. In fact, they set the second one, the 50% threshold, 16 years later, so they had learned a lot, and they still set it. The reason they did that was that 50% is because of the weighting. They said, we think that if you weight it, because they knew that many people that paid a large amount would be less supportive, they decided to make it a 50% threshold. They could have passed Prop 218. It probably would have passed at 2/3. They didn't want to get criticized as a minority rules type situation. So the Prop 218 thing, and you can probably hear I get a little impassioned, I think it's an extremely fair. You ask everyone if they want this, and you let them vote in the exact same proportion that they would have to pay. And if you can get 50% of those, that's a true majority rules. We will want to work with people, and we have a Q&A and all kinds of things that we provide to help people be comfortable with the pros and cons. Neither Prop 218 or 13 are perfect. A criticism we get of Prop 218, frankly, this is a property owner balloting, so renters cannot vote. And we're in Santa Cruz County where there's a lot of renters, and they said, we don't like this because renters can vote. We go to other counties where they say, we don't want renters to be able to vote. We want only property owners. Nothing is perfect, but what we would
I, by the way, thought that we handled this sometime in the 1600s, maybe slightly after that, as we developed a constitution, which was not based on property, but as one person, one vote.
Right.
And this got into that discussion. In
Yes, exactly. Well. And there's a lot of historical elements of it. Okay, so hopefully I've given you a little direction on, or a little input on that. In the issue of secrecy, it is not a secret ballot. I want to be very clear about this. It comes out of a different tradition. The tradition of an assessment was, in fact, in the old days, a board of supervisors could simply pass an assessment by a 3 votes to 2, and it would become assessable unless there was a protest hearing. And one element of a protest hearing is people could write letters saying we don't want it to happen. So the ballot that we call it in an assessment, and maybe we shouldn't call it a ballot, is essentially a formalized letter. So the idea is it's very public. It's a letter from the property owner to you saying they support something or don't support something. So it is the records are open to the public. It was also part of Jarvis's idea that they did not want voter fraud. What could be more transparent than having every record, every ballot kept there? Now, people are uncomfortable with that, frankly. And so what we advise strongly, and this is what all of our clients, I think every single one has done, is we will, after the tabulation, everything gets boxed up, and in fact, we often put it in a resolution where there will be no individual analysis unless requested by a third party. So we want to protect to the degree we can within the Prop 218, we want to protect the privacy of an individual so they can do it. And I think we can do that. It hasn't been an issue, but it is surprising to people, and it's a criticism you all will get. You will get on the street, they'll say, all 3 of these, well, actually the first 2. The third one is a little bit different. Absolutely, it could not be clearer in Prop 218 that there's a public hearing requirement. We do a public hearing every single time, and the question we get on a public hearing is, why do you have the public hearing at the end, not at the beginning? That seems funny. And what we do is and here's the reason. The public hearing is a requirement of Prop 218. We encourage our clients to hold public hearings or town meetings, whatever you want to call them, throughout the entire process to get the word out and answer any questions. But there is a public hearing that's required at the end of the 45 days prior to the tabulation of the ballots. We will bring actually with us ballots and laptop computer, and people at the public hearing, and it's almost always true, there's always a few people that don't make their decision until they've heard all the public input. You all as a board, if you decide to go forward, should take that public input very seriously, because you're going to have, ultimately, the ballots will all be in. You will take the public comment, and then you will close the public comment and ask for the tabulation of the ballots. After the tabulation of the ballots, the results will be read off to you. If 50% plus 1 of the returned ballots weighted by the proposed assessment are in support, then this only becomes an assessment if and only if you all pass a resolution. And you should consider 2 things. You should consider what were the results of the balloting. Obviously, you can't go forward without that. And also any input you get from a public hearing. It exists at the end almost like a remnant of the old system, So it is a funny thing, and we do get questions about it. However, it usually works out. And then the question, maybe you'll have it, do we know of any time where the balloting has been in support, but based on input from the public hearing, the governing board decided not to go forward? We don't know of any cases of that. The kind of the extreme example I gave is, what if Marty backed his pickup into a tree and it bent over and oil started leaking out of the ground? He could bring that up at the public hearing, and you could say, gee, we don't need the money anymore. Something extreme like that would have to happen, but we think it's very unusual. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. There's not much oil in Calaveras County. But if that happens, yeah, exactly. If that happens, so that's a stupid example. Maybe gold, yeah.
You've seen Marty drive.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have. Sorry, Marty.
It fits Marty's driving pattern, but not our local geology.
Yeah, so again, all of these are good questions. There's no perfect answer, and I hope that I addressed them somewhat.
I have two other really quick questions which will require only quick answers.
Okay.
The first is also required in this is an engineering report that develops the nexus between the service to each type of parcel and the relative cost of delivering that service. Have you ever had any of your engineering reports litigated?
Yes, and let me answer.
And what was the result of?
One and only one. It's not very relevant to this. It's for open space in Santa Clara. It has gone. It's been appealed. We have been successful in every case, but it's on appeal right now, and it is being considered to be heard by the Supreme Court, the California State Supreme Court. We don't know if that will happen. We've had no litigations on any of our mosquito or fire or undergrounding or flood control or any of those. However, the good news is they've been well vetted by many county councils, city attorneys, and private attorneys up and down the state. So we think that a lot of eyes have looked at them, but the only litigation is what is called the Santa Clara case.
All right. And finally, you listed some very impressive victories in a variety of elections. I'm wondering the other side of it.
Yeah.
How many have you lost, and where were they and what margins?
Okay. Let me talk to this, and Jeanette, you may want to help me out. We've had about 70 victories, and we've had about 5 unsuccessful ballotings, and we learned a lot more from the 5 probably than the 70. They're very, very important. Only one of them is quite relevant to you, and I want to talk about that one. The others one was for open space or parks, and the one that is relevant is one that just happened a year ago, and it was in a very rural part of Fresno County, a small area of Fresno County, and it was also mosquito. What it had is we had a lower level of support to begin with, slightly than you all, and we saw a decay because there was a perfect storm of combination between an opposite, well-motivated, bright, bored citizens and the newspaper. And that combination decayed the support over time. So it is something that we talked about when we saw the results. We talked to Brian and Marty, and we talked about the media and some of the other factors here, because that area of Fresno County, frankly, is kind of a Sierra foothills similar to this. So there are some parallels. So it's something, I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's something that we learned a lot, and we will want to keep our eyes on. What we want to be careful of is that there is not a unreasonable negative reaction by local media. We want to be fair and straightforward with them, and we have, I want to bring this back to the over 30 mosquitoes we have been successful, but that one was unsuccessful.
All right, final question. In your polling in rural areas, similar to this,
yes,
has there been an increase between the polling data and the final election result? Yes. On average?
Yes, in virtually every case except for that Fresno case. We usually have seen not huge, but a 1 to 2%. In Fresno County, Shasta, Tehama, Placer, we usually will see so our survey is skewing slightly below what our final results are. It's hard to know exactly because in all of those cases there was good community outreach, so we don't know how much of it was community outreach and perhaps a slight skew in the survey methodology.
But close correlation to survey.
Yeah, very, very predictive.
In all
extremely predictive.
75 to 80.
So we've had some, in the failures that we've had, we still believe our survey was accurate. We believe there was a real decay in support, and it's an organized, if there's a well-organized opposition, it doesn't take many people. But if they want to, as you all know, you're all seasoned politicians, a well-motivated opposition can be very effective. So that's something we would have to look at very, very closely.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
When early last year, Marty was here and we talked about authorizing the position, and we had grant program, what, 80,000 or something we got to fund this thing. How do we go from 80,000 to 470,000? Why is it going to cost 470,000, or we're going for that kind of revenue?
Well, I think that the way to best answer that is this is one of those instances where you almost work backwards into it. In other words, first of all, are people in favor of it? And if so, what are they in favor of? Like John was saying, usually we see that curve start up here and go down. Quite honestly, we didn't go into it saying we need X amount of dollars. We just said, are people in favor of it? And if so, what dollar amount are they in favor of? So it could have just as easily been $11.50 as $21.50 as $16.50 will tell you the scope of what you're going to be able to do as far as the program is concerned. So I guess to answer that question is we didn't identify a $400,000 number. We are just simply still in the process of saying, does the community want it? If they do, how much do they want? So it's really dictated. Kind of the neat thing about this is the program, if it's accepted by the populace, the actual program and size of the program is determined by the electorate. And so again, it's not a matter of us identifying 400,000. It's a matter of this is what the community is willing to support. They could have been willing to support 200,000, 80,000, or 600,000. We didn't know. It's just a matter of scoping out, what people will actually be interested in paying if they're in favor of it at all.
But that's a good question that he asked.
Well, it strikes me as that we raise, with our solid waste fee, we raise about $4 million, and this is 10% of that. And I don't see that we need, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we aren't going to have 10% as many garbage trucks or mosquito trucks on the road as we have garbage trucks. I mean, I just think that it's really an odd thing to do, just to propose something because we've determined that the traffic will bear that amount of pain. I don't know.
Actually, thus far, as you know, we've received in excess of $200,000 to begin this program. That has purchased us a vehicle. It's upgraded another vehicle that we bought with other grant funding, not mosquito grant funding. It's the current positions in the department are really split between waste tire enforcement, and that's other grant funding from the waste board, and the mosquito funding that we used to have. Right now, we are more merged into the waste tire than we are even the mosquito at this point, because the grant funding is disappearing from mosquito. So Marty and Paul Eads are working more on the waste tire enforcement. As a matter of fact, we just sent in a grant application, didn't we, to the waste board, and we're still working with them as to what that total amount is going to be this year. But really, at this point, we're almost the equivalent of a one full-time equivalent is all for the program. But what we've done is we've shared it with other programs, more specifically the waste tire program, to make it work. So we've kind of crisscrossed the programs. And again, Marty does waste tires and mosquitoes, and so does Paul Eads.
So if I can add on that, one of the things we looked at, because we're curious of kind of the same thing, what is the right size program? And in fact, Marty and I have had some conversations on this, and you may want to talk about some of the different programs you've talked about, because I know you've done some research on this. Because though we're not mosquito professionals, we do work with most of the mosquito and vector control districts up and down the state. And so early on, Marty and I had some conversations about what would be the right size in terms of the number of staff he would have as compared to other districts that have similar populations and areas. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything on the size of the program under that budget, that $400,000 to $500,000 budget.
Because your question, yeah, it was looked at. We had one person before, we'll have any more too. And first of all, the program is not dealing with just mosquitoes and not dealing with just ticks that we currently have. We're also watching what's happening worldwide. We're watching as we have so many residents who travel abroad. And we have a lot of emerging diseases that are quickly spreading into Western and Southern Europe from African countries. Things like that we're watching and we're preparing the county for those, as well as the current threats that we have out there and our current diseases that we have in the county. With that being said, the money would be used on what does it take to be able to perform those duties in the county. And we're not looking at 20 people, 20 trucks, things like that. We will always be a small district. We are a small rural county, and we will remain that way, so we will protect what we have here, the community. So that money would be probably between 4 to 5 people, and that's what it would take with just a handful of vehicles to protect the public of Calaveras County.
And in addition to that, I might add, it's not just about the staffing of the people that are out in the field, but it's also the overhead. And what I mean by that is somebody has to pay the 887 cost, as an example. Okay, so one of the recommendations we would have before the board is, should this go forward and should it pass, is there's a lot of questions, but does the board want to serve as the board, or do they want to have an independent board? And we can cross that bridge when we come to it. But there are other costs associated with running the department. Who's going to pay for county council? Who's going to pay the auditor to cut the checks? Who's going to pay for those things, for administration, for county administration? Those things that are the hidden costs that aren't necessarily the things that the public's going to see out on the street, as Marty or Paul or whoever else is going up to do a fog, as an example, for mosquito control, or going out with the state, or going out by themselves and doing tick collections, or going out and doing surveys for plague, okay? Or even looking because there might be rabies concerns. Those kinds of things that may be endemic in Sierra foothill communities. So I think there's a lot of hidden costs there that are more than just the person to buy the chemical or rear the mosquito fish or whatever it happens to be. So there's a lot more to it.
Not to exceed 5%.
Correct. Correct.
One of the things about an assessment is that the district or however the agency or department is set up is obliged to not assess more than they need to perform the services as described in the engineer's report. So if the ballots went out at $16.50 and the district could perform its duties for $10, they would be obliged to only assess $10. So if you don't do that, you can get yourself into some trouble. And so we strongly advise to all our clients to not assess a penny more than need be. One of the things you could consider today, and I know I put a little pressure saying that if we wanted to go forward this year, we don't need to necessarily decide the rate today. We can start doing a lot of our engineering and a lot of our work, and perhaps Brian and Marty could return to you with a budget that showed some detail as to where they need to be in terms of that as we mesh these. And the meshing has been informal, and maybe we need to tighten that up to get to a rate. We can report that we think the $16.50 and that amount that it generates, we think the support is there for that. But that ultimately, as part of the engineer's report, there's a budget, and so there's some iterative process as we go back and forth and see decide what level of support is there. Brian has said, in a way, the community has spoken. They want that amount of support, but that needs to be balanced with talking to other districts in other areas, seeing the level of service you all want to come up with that amount, and that the rate would ultimately be based on that, not kind of an arbitrary rate of $16.50 as we choose in the survey, if that makes sense.
And just so the board's aware, is that Marty has spent a lot of time talking to some of our neighboring districts down in the valley, and actually has put budgets together. Okay. And as far as, not really knowing what the budget would be, but just projections, everything from an annual budget of $100,000 to an annual budget of over $500,000. And he's actually broken it out into everything from small tools to equipment maintenance to chemical to insurance and the like, just what you find in your regular Schedule 9. So we actually do have projected budgets depending on, at the time that this survey was being done was when Marty was putting this together, but John was not aware that we were actually looking at the budget at the end of it ahead of time. So we would actually have a budget going in to show you approximately what we would be proposing to spend on fuel, as an example. $418,000, what's your fuel at there? Is it $9,200 annually? So that's an example and of what we would be looking at. Of course, the numbers are subject to change.
I'm spending more than that.
Spending money at the object code.
John, can you use any of this if we did this for public health? Because public health has been involved in this issue, or would it just be for the district? I mean, could they pay or hire environmental health to do community outreach or?
Yeah, we'd have to get, what we would want to do is read the health and safety code and understand what all we're allowed to assess for within the services. Community outreach and education is certainly, no matter who does it, would certainly be covered by the health and safety code for vector control assessments. So there's certainly latitude in that, but we want to look closely and probably work with county council to make sure everyone was comfortable with how the assessment dollars were spent.
Well, if I could piggyback on that one question, it does strike me that in some of the description of the extra duties besides the immediate vector control, that does have a substantial overlap with people in the public health field, and that for community outreach and for education, we've got very highly trained people who are doing a great job, I imagine, in planning for possible bird flu or other type international issues. And I would hate to see us fund, exclusively in this area if in fact what's going on is something that best belongs in public health, and I would rather see a collaborative in this regard. And the engineering report should reflect that before anything would go out to.
And we can do that. In fact, Glenn County, we can put you in touch with Glenn County. That's precisely what they're doing. They're having their community outreach people do.
Can I just make my final comment somewhere I'm resting on this issue? One, I guess I would want to see. I'd want to see the figures. I'd want it nailed down. Is it going to be $16.50, $8.50, $3.75? But the other thing is that we just had a vote for the jail ballot, and there was a lot of community outreach on that, and it passed. To me, it was not an overwhelming pass, but it did pass. I'm very concerned, and we don't have a building yet, and we don't have the other half of our funding. I'm real concerned about, and this isn't your issue, John, this is really at Calaveras, and by the way, I do appreciate you're not sugarcoating things. I mean, you're very good. I do appreciate that. I'm not sure that I'm ready to go out for something on this at this time. when we just did one, now to go out for another one, even if it's at $4 a single-family dwelling or $16.50 a single-family dwelling, until we have some time pass and until we, or at least breaking ground for a justice facility. I don't think now is the time to do it. That's just my take, and I'm sorry there's no more grants available, and this is an important issue for public health and safety, but so's the jail, and so's paying $3.60 a gallon for gas, and the construction industry that's down. So I would have, I don't think I could support it at this time.
Why don't we, if there are no further questions, why don't we poll the board on that very topic and see where people are at on this set of choices before us. Russ?
Well, I don't want anybody here to think that I'm not in favor of having a program like this, but I share Maria's concerns about the timing of going out to the voters for tapping their wallets one more time here, and I'd like to see it happen after the groundbreaking ceremony too. That would suit me to just put it off a little bit, and then it'll give us a chance to really look at the cost of this, because I at the risk of being overly redundant, I just don't think that it's proper to test the water to see how much pain people will endure. I'd like to know what we're going to spend. I mean, this is based on about 28,000 parcels. I'm just doing the raw arithmetic. We have a very reasonable right to believe that we might grow in population, but is it like a 45-degree curve? I mean, if you go up 10% in population, does it really cost you an extra 10% to run the program? I'm not sure. There must be some efficiencies in just running the program for the first household. It doesn't cost you twice as much to run it for two. But it's a long way around the barn, but I'm not ready to put this on the back of the taxpayers right now.
Bill?
It's really tough because I really like this program, but I tend to agree with Maria and Russ. His timing is sensitive here. The survey was in January, is that correct?
Yeah.
And so it's a really short period of time from January to April 1st, but even in that period of time, confidence in the economy has eroded, as we all know, and it's a very fickle issue. I've got nothing but faith. You did the survey said yes. So I don't have any trouble with that at all. We've invested $23.5, and the way I normally look at things is if you invested this much in your business, you have to invest a little bit more if you have the confidence of the survey, and if I understand correctly, that would come back to pay that off were it successful. When we do this, and I'll remain in support of this at some point, I would support it with a max. I think you addressed that. Maybe it won't be $16.50, but not to exceed, let's say, like that. My question, I guess, about this is the $23.5 that we've spent, what sort of life does that have? If we don't...
Good question. Yeah, what we have found, actually, in fact, we're in San Luis Obispo. Our boss is in San Luis Obispo, and we've done a survey there 4 years ago, and then we did one here, and we got about the same level of support. We think these surveys actually seem to have a relatively long span. What we would, but there's a kind of a logic. Has anything happened that would cause a big decay or an increase? So that's one of the things we would look at. Is there anything macroscopic? And I agree with your statement is actually right on. Even a January through April has got us some concern because there's been a real negativism in the last couple of months. So let me give you a more specific answer. We think that the long-term viability of an assessment for vector control here in Calaveras County is very strong. As you get more people coming in, you are right, there's an efficiency. That's why in the Bay Area, the vector control districts ask for $5, and in the rural areas, they ask for $30. There's definitely an efficiency, so that will only help. Also, those populations coming in will tend to be more supportive of this kind of thing. So that will help you. We want to, so time will help you. The economy, if it continues to decay, that doesn't help you. So you have those kind of forces against one another. We have all the data, we have much of the work done, and at some point in the future, if you wanted to wait 2 or 3 years, we would come back and recommend for a very small amount of money, we would send out a tracker survey. So some subset of this, just to make sure there wasn't a change. If you, on the other hand, said, we want to reconsider this in a couple months or after the presidential, we would say that you could, unless something big happens, that you could ballot now or in September or in May of 2009 based on these results. Probably further than that, we would definitely recommend a tracker, and assuming nothing big happens. So I hope that was somewhat helpful.
It does, and I'm enthusiastic about the program. I think it's got, the value there is quite obvious. We've pretty much agreed for a long time that health and safety issues are a priority here. Mm-hmm. And of course, we've had from our health services agency, we've had presentations showing that this problem of mosquito and vector control is not static, it's increasing. So I'm sure that the board would want to take some action there, and I would like to see it happen before May of next year. But right now, it's just too uncertain for me.
Okay. However truncated, I'm still trying to poll the board, so we'll ask. Did you have?
Well, I just had one other kind of hypothetical question here to ask. The $80,000 that you're talking about, the total of 14.5 and 64.4. That where would that come from right now? And granted, it would be reimbursed if it was successful, but if it died in flames,
from the general fund, and most likely in this case, it would be contingencies or reserves.
Or budgeted if you do it in July.
Yeah.
Or by magic.
Yeah.
Tom, do you have?
I also don't believe the timing. Not only is the timing not right at this period of time, but I think I'm having a hard time making a connection that there's a significant health hazard connected with our mosquito population. I think in order for this to be successful, somebody's going to need to convince the citizenry that we're more at risk than West Nile virus, which is in some of the birds and other things that we're not going to eliminate anyway. We vaccinate our horses for it every year. To be spending basically almost $500,000, I think there needs to be a clear connection of exactly what the risks are that we are attempting to eliminate and how significant those risks are. Those are my comments.
All right, and I have a few comments of my own. I do come from a district that's had the only human experience in West Nile virus, so there's a little bit more heightened concern. We also have something of an outbreak of Lyme disease in some parts of my district, and those are issues that are of concern. And finally, we've had a number of rabid animals in our district, and those are issues of concern as well. I agree with my fellow board members that this constituency has been very generous and in producing the money for Prop J, and that they're likely to be very cynical about any follow-up until we have followed up, which we're doing, but it's not evident in the immediate few months. So the groundbreaking becomes I think, kind of the moment where we can say, we asked you to do this and we accomplished that. One of the things that we didn't talk about much in the poll or in the study session is the very deep attachment that people in this county have about two things. One is they don't want to pay a penny unless they know what it's going for, very specifically. So the engineering nexus and all of that stuff becomes actually very important, but more important is, what exact service are we talking about? We've talked about 80,000. We're talking about the tolerance of the immediate pull in the absence of all the other things we may be putting forward. Facilities fees, the issue of our building and planning fees, the questions about parks and rec. There are many things that we've maybe not done that other counties have done, and this is one. The order of it, the timing of it, and the specificity of it is very important. Secondly, and this is real important to me because I'm now caught up in, we had to have a fundraiser that raised $20,000 last weekend so our fire department could continue to function because one person with money and a lawyer hung them up on the engineering report, and we have some people who specialize in this county and make it their business to hang these things up forever. And that puts you in a state of suspended animation while you spend as much money on litigation as you would have on the service itself without providing the service, which I find to be a zero-sum game. My hope is that we can really think these things through carefully, that we have a plan. I would support it, by the way. I would support it conceivably as early as May of next year, if we have those things in place, and if the process, and this is the final point, the reason I asked all the process issues is because this is a fierce electorate. They care about process, and they participate in it. This is a process that almost nobody outside of West Point has seen, but it will be so alien and so different than some of the principles of democracy that they have experienced that I believe that in this community is going to be more of an issue than in most other places, and we need to have a clear plan of explanation so that people know exactly what they're getting into before we have that well-organized and highly funded opposition that occasionally rises up and kills one of these. That said, I think my constituents support this, that they want to see a strong vector control, and they want to see a broad-based one. And I think for me personally, I want to see one that also deals with public health seamlessly. So I hope people will take these messages, take a look at the timing. We do have a decision, I think, that we haven't really conveyed, which is, are we saying no to, are we saying take a time out and revisit it in the not too distant future, sometime within this year? Are we saying go ahead with one or both phases as being produced here? That's what I'm hearing is no to that.
Right.
No.
But I want to
We're
know
not
what
spending any more money until we know where we are financially.
All right.
And we get a sense of where the economy is.
All right, so we're essentially not killing it, but we are putting it on hold pending further information, and both in those areas of the nexus and engineering, at least thinking about that, but also in the time, our ability to produce on the jail and the election cycles.
John, can you break this down by district with all the respondents?
Absolutely.
Well, maybe Brian could send that to us. I think it'd be just...
Yeah, we'll do that. We can do it by supervisorial district.
Yeah,
sure.
great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Generally, we don't see great variances, but it's relatively easy for us to do, so we'll be happy to do that.
I'm willing to bet you might see some differences in this this county. All right. Well, thank you very much. Brian, do you need anything further?
Is there a month?
Not before.
No, not a month.
I mean, John said if
Is there
we...
a month time?
I would say toward the end of this year, we might want to check in and see how we're doing, and also whether we've achieved the funding for the jail and we're getting ready to actually do something.
Why don't you bring it up under discussion at final budget?
Okay.
Yes, I think that.
Just as an update.
Right, and that would put
I'm
you,
not saying
that
it's
would
going to get
still
funded, just
put
bring
it
it up
on
as an
schedule
update.
to consider
That's basically August or
2009.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Thank you very much. Is
Thank
there
you.
any public comment before adjourning? Thank you very much for attending, and we'll call it a day here. Meeting adjourned.